welcome to the Big Dress Energy podcast, where we explore, the how you can harness the psychological principles of fashion and style, not just to upgrade your look, but also think more about how your general overall style and the choices that you make can really boost your well-being and help you to step into your most authentic self. My name is Shakaila Forbes-Bell. I'm a fashion psychologist and author of the book Big Dress Energy, which is out now. Make sure you get your copy. And for this episode, I am joined with someone I consider actually my friend and low-key mentor, but she hasn't actually agreed to that. I am joined by Karen Arthur. Karen Arthur is a former teacher, fashion creative, model, content creator, podcaster, and speaker who has been honing her craft for over 40 years. Karen lifts the veil on the inevitable and fundamental changes that every woman will go through. She sheds the light on coping with the realities of the transitions for young women and reminds mature women to own their value and to buck convention and stereotypes and the world's attempts at erasure for these groups of women. So first of all, thank you so much, Karen, for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. That's quite an introduction. I'm enjoying that.
I'm glad you are. So just kick things off, I asked all of my guests the same question. What does having big dress energy mean to you?
Big dress energy means wearing what you love. It's not worrying about what other people think about you. It's not worrying about, any convention in terms of how old you are or how young you are or that kind of thing. Big dress energy shows in your demeanor, and your clothes help you to do that.
Perfect. I love that. It's something actually I picked up on in the book as well. I spoke to a former psychologist and she was saying that, you know, we dress within boundaries, right? As much as we like to say that we're just completely free, we have to adhere to social and cultural norms, but there are aspects of those norms that we can challenge, and we have the right to challenge those where we can. And I think through your work, that's exactly what you're doing. So I want to dive right in and talk about how I met you ages ago. I can't remember how many years, but this is back when my blog was just very slapdash and I was just trying to figure out what I'm doing. I met Karen at a talk. This was a talk with
That's right.
Hassan from Nubian
I
Skin.
sought you out.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, my name's Shakaila, fashion psychologist. And Karen pulled me to the side and we had a lovely chat. And honestly, the rest is history. But back then, you were really getting involved in your Wear Your Happy workshops, which I just loved because I just feel like that is exactly what fashion psychology is all about. Can you tell our listeners a bit more about that and like why you started that and what they entailed?
So I first of all want to congratulate you on your book. You wrote a whole book, Kayla,
Oh,
and I
thank
don't
you.
want you to underestimate how huge that is. I'm really very, very proud of you. Absolutely will be your mentor. It's
Oh, thank you
absolutely
so
fine.
much.
So so Where You're Happy
Yeah.
was born from grief, actually. It was born because I had a breakdown, which I now refer to as a breakthrough. And when my lots of things happened. I left my teaching career of almost 30 years behind, 2015. And I decided at that time, I was suffering from anxiety and depression. I decided to pour my energies into myself and look after myself for the first time in decades. And I thought I was going to be the healthiest, most together person going into the next, 4 or 5 decades of my life. And then my aunt Monica went into hospital, and I was consumed with this idea of these fantasies about what a perfect niece I was going to be when she came out. She didn't come out. She passed away on June the 11th, 2015. And that floored me. I was already ill. I was in therapy. I went into therapy thinking I was going to be talking about, leaving work, and ended up talking about lots of things as you do with therapy. It's not very straightforward.
Yeah.
Best thing I ever did, by the way. And I ended up, I was consumed with, well, I missed this woman that I didn't see enough. So I was also consumed with guilt. And I missed the person that I guess the niece I thought I was going to be. So I started to wear her clothes when I started to get better. First of all, when I was suffering from depression in particular, I dressed in a lot of black, a lot of hoodies, baggy clothes, not my thing. I didn't leave the house often unless I absolutely had to. I imagined that people would, you know, think that I was faking it because depression is something, an illness that you can't see. And I didn't know how to explain that. And so when I started to get better, I started to wear her clothing. I wore my Aunt Monica's clothing. I'm moving this around because I can't seem to stay centre. There you go, I'm back.
There you go.
So I kept. She wasn't into fashion per se, but she liked like many Caribbean, you parentage. They love a Marks and Spencer and a C and A, good quality clothing, right?
You're
So
a laugh.
she had right. So I kept two of her skirts, one of which I still have, which was a long A-line 70s maxi red skirt, a pair of her earrings, and a bangle. And I would, when I felt like I needed courage or I wanted to take her with me somewhere, if I was going to, she really liked classical music, if I was going to a concert or if I was going to an art gallery, I took her with me. And I started to talk about this on Twitter at the time. Instagram wasn't so prevalent. I started to hashtag it where you're happy because I started to make very conscious decisions about what I was going to put on. I remember once I was going to a jazz festival, I was going to Jazz Refreshed. Friends of mine run Jazz Refreshed, which is a weekly live event that used to happen in Portobello Road and now happens in Brick Lane. Shout out to them. And they were running a festival at the South Bank Centre, and I knew that I'd bulk, I wouldn't go. I knew that if I didn't arrange to meet a friend, I wouldn't go. Uh, but even that, I was late. I come out the shower, I'm sitting on my bed, it's hot outside, sun's, doing its thing, and I didn't want to go. I wanted to get back into bed. And I looked around my wardrobe and I thought, what can I wear that will get me out the house, that will get me from my bed to the station? Because once I get on the train, it'll be fine. And once I get there, I'll know everyone. It'll be brilliant. So I chose a bright yellow kente cloth head wrap and a yellow Ankara shirt, blouse that I'd made, and a pair of jeans that I'd also made, and a pair of bright yellow camper bouncy, like sandals. And I felt like a queen. I mean, the fabric was so heavy that you had to stand tall, and some
Mm.
amazing earrings. And I felt amazing. And I remember that being the pivoting moment. I think it was sometime, I don't remember the date, but it's something like the 6th of August or something, 2015, where I ended up. And I got there and I had a great time. And I started to do that more. And I think where you're happy, people assume, understandably, that because I wear bright colours, that where you're happy is about wearing bright clothing. But
Mm.
wearing clothing you love, there's all sorts of things in our wardrobe that we have decided not to wear for all sorts of reasons. We think they might not fit us. That's fair enough. They might be they might be too young for us, or they might be clothing, for example, clothes from that have unhappy memories. I say wear the clothes you love. Layer up your summer clothing. If you love summer clothing because you always are on holiday and you're always feeling happy, then put a polo neck jumper underneath them. Wear textures that feel good against your skin, you know. Um, and as I started to do that, I became more confident about my fashion. I used to dress to be seen. I was a head of house in a boys' school, and I wore heels and, flesh-colored tights and great suits and, much more understated earrings. And I always looked on point, and I loved being complimented on what I wore. I loved it, but it was outside validation. What happened with Where You're Happy is as I started to get better with therapy, with silence, with meditation, journaling, affirmation, all of that, I also started to step into how powerful I feel when I wear what I like, and I started to worry less about what people thought of me. I mean, sometimes I look bonkers, but I feel great. And what I also find about Where You're Happy is not just that it makes me feel good, because sometimes it's stuff that wouldn't be apparent. I'm a big fan of matching lingerie. I spend my money on lingerie. I love that bit. But no one really is seeing it,
Yeah.
it's for me. And once I started to do that, you find that you radiate that confidence because people will compliment you. And when you dress the way, especially women, because fashion does us a disservice, doesn't it? When you dress the way that you really want to, it empowers other people to do the same.
Mhm.
So I live by Where You're Happy. During lockdown, it saved me because I dressed every day as if I was leaving the house, apart from shoes. I didn't put shoes on. I had very nice, So I encourage everybody to do that. And this is why we connected, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because fashion psychology, first of all, I didn't know you could do a degree in it. I was blown away when I think I saw you on Twitter first, and
Yeah.
then you did this talk at Kayad
Mm.
with Talika,
Yeah.
asking you a question, Tika Kirkland. And I thought, I've got to meet this woman. I've got to find out more about this. And at one point, I wanted to do a fashion psychology degree, but that's another story.
Mhm.
And we move.
That's a whole other thing. But I'm telling you, everything you said, it's the principles of
Yeah,
fashion
yeah,
psychology. Like everything you just said is the book. That's big just energy. Like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just so powerful. There's so many things. Like I even thought so interesting when you talked about your head wrap and how it changed your physical like stature. And there's this thing I talk about in the book about power posing and how
Mm,
actually holding your body in specific positions can actually boost your confidence and make you take up more space in the room. And it's so cool to see how your clothes and your stature can go hand in hand to actually change the way you feel and to just help you step into your sense of self. I just love that. And something that obviously really hits me home is something I've spoken about a lot is the loss of my sister. And I
mm,
always thought, I'm wearing her clothes quite a lot. And I thought, God, is this a bit weird? And it wasn't until I wrote it in the book that I realized a lot of people do it.
yeah,
And we often don't realize how valuable things are until someone passes. I think a lot
yeah.
of times when people are talking about clothes, they think of it as, oh, frivolous. It's talk about in the sustainability aspect, it's talking about very negative and we need to just stop having things and stop buying clothes. But we don't understand their true value. And
Mm,
they tell a story about the person because they made that decision at that time and they said, this is something that's for me. This is something I'm going to wear. It's going to be part of me and my story, and you wearing that after they've passed, it's you carrying on that story as well, even in small ways. It helps you, like you said, it helps you change, like just navigate your grief, and even in small ways just kind of build you up, and that's such a powerful thing as well. And yeah, it's just
yeah.
amazing to hear so many stories of people utilizing clothes in that way. And I just love everything you said with Where You're Happy. Like, yeah, I'm telling you, that's the ethos of everything we're
I
talking
think
about.
that memory thing is important.
Mm.
And I feel that, like you say, people underestimate fashion and they like to see it as frivolous, and it is anything but. But
Mhm.
I will also say that I fell into that camp when I first left teaching because I was faced with, let's say, if I'm lucky, 40 years ahead of me, 30, 40 years ahead of me of life, determined to curate a life that I loved and only do things that I loved. But I couldn't get my head round wanting to be a fashion designer, which is what I wanted to be when I was 7, 8, 9,
Same.
and choosing and not having a degree in it. And that's what, in a sense, led me to thinking, oh, well, if I can do fashion psychology, then that will mean I'm validated, which means I could start being a fashion designer. But I've
Mm.
been a fashion designer since I was could sew, you
Mm.
know. I've always been a creative, and I don't and I anybody listening to this, you don't need outside validation. If what you love is what you do, and you keep doing it, at some point you become an expert at it. And I'm an expert several times over. But at
Yeah.
that time, I was, I suppose, because I was so wedded to my career and my status, and I'm a teacher, that that whole thing of, "Oh, I'm a fashion designer." Well, where did you go to uni? Well, I didn't, I was really suffering from massive imposter syndrome, or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. Whereas now I realise I'd been doing it all along, and where you're happy enabled me to really and to grow into the person I am now, and the person I continue to become, because we're all works in progress, as you know.
100%. I mean, I completely resonate with that as well. I always wanted to be a designer, but I feel like the rigorous activities of like design school and like all the
This
prep,
is
I
it.
was like, nah, man, I can't do
That's why I
it.
didn't do it, you know. That's why I didn't do it,
Yeah.
because I was like, it's really competitive. This is
Mm,
the messaging I got, and I thought, I don't want to do that. And I was really into dance, and
yes.
could dance. And when I found out you could do a degree in dance, I was like, this is it. This is what. So I just did dance, and then went into teaching because I was good at it, you know.
Mm,
So yeah, it's funny how life does that. I mean,
yeah.
I'm, practically 3 times your age, but it's life does that. It's really important to do the stuff you love. It's such a
Yeah.
cliche to say, if you love it, the money will come.
Yeah.
It's a cliche because it's actually true.
True.
But if someone had said that to me 7 years ago when I was skint, I would have said,
Like, shut up.
"Yeah,
I
I
knew
know,
it
right?"
was brilliant. No, it's the same. It's so crazy how like our stories parallel because I used to be a dancer back at school. Like I did all the competitions. I still consider myself a dancer, even though I haven't been to a class in God knows how long, and I'm probably a bit stiff. But I just love that aspect of just being free and performing and being out there. Like like with your background in dance, do you feel like it's influenced what you're doing now, just being a bit more public eye? Like, do you think there's a link there?
Do you know what? I don't. I have. Okay, same. I haven't done a class for a while, and I taught dance. Even when I stopped
Mm,
teaching it in schools, I was teaching. I managed to somehow bag my way into teaching exchange students every summer. So I did that for
mm.
years, for a good decade after I stopped teaching.
Yeah.
And again, it's the same thing. It's about freedom.
Mm,
It's about being now dancing around the living room, around my kitchen. I do love a class, but as an ex-teacher, I'm also very fussy about who's teaching me.
uh,
So because there's an assumption that if you're a dancer, you can also be a dance teacher. That's not the case. They're different
mm,
skills.
yeah.
And so I can be I'm also quite intuitive about where I take my energy and who
Mm,
I share my energy with. So in class, I have to feel comfortable. And if I feel that it's ageist, or they're not catering to my needs, then I kind of step away.
mm,
But I think that my degree was in performing arts, and I'm finding that all of my past is kind of catching up to me, in a sense, in a good way, in a sense that being able to speak, being able to articulate myself, standing in a certain way, acting to some extent, modeling,
mm,
all of that means I'm very comfortable with my body, and I'm very comfortable with what comes out of my mouth. And
yeah.
while sometimes I'm having an out of body experience thinking, Karen, what are you talking about? Actually, I'm very mindful about how I speak, because I know that when I open my mouth, people listen.
Yeah.
So I think that's a roundabout way of saying yes. But I'm big, if even if I'm not dancing, I'm moving, in the sense that I'm grateful my body can move. I stretch every day.
Yeah.
Um, I went for a run this morning. I said to you earlier, I'm so grateful that I can, when I drop something on the floor, I can pick it up, or, that I can't, that, one of the reasons I cut my hair is that when I run, it kind of, the wind goes through it. I just
Yeah.
and because I had a period when I left teaching, not only did I plummet into anxiety and depression, I also had a year I couldn't walk. And I walked with a stick. Because
Mm.
my body was like, okay, now we've got you. We're really gonna get you. And so it took a long time for me to come out of that kind of there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of grateful that I'm here. I'm doing what I love, and I'm open to whatever's coming next. So I don't even know whether that answers your question, but
No,
that's your
it
answer.
does. And it's really interesting, if you don't mind. I'd love to talk about that period when you had difficulty walking, because I have a invisible illness. It's a chronic pain condition, and it gives me a lot of pain. I'm constantly at war with my body, and that impacts the way I dress. Sometimes I want to be in the high boots. I want to be in the tight tops and everything, but God, sometimes my body's just like, no, like this is not gonna work. And at the beginning, I really used to fight with myself. I used to be angry, just pissed off that I couldn't wear and dress and just do how I want. But now it's just forced me to be a bit more mindful and to explore different styles and different ways I can embrace comfort, and just to have the two things work for me, the style and the comfort. Is that something that you experienced as well?
Yeah, my experience with, imagine, you've left your career behind and you think, right, I'm free, I can do all this stuff. And
Yeah.
my body licked me down, literally floored me. And there was no explanation for it. I woke up one day and I couldn't walk. I had a pain, excruciating pain down my side. But what had also happened, I had fallen when I was off sick before I actually left work. I fell down a very small hole, shook the whole of my body up, and it meant mm, gradually I started to shut down. My body started to shut down. So I had to be really mindful about looking after myself, you know, and it was really important to me that I ended up going for yoga therapy. Yoga therapy is like, if you've never heard of it, it is literally therapy using yoga. Yoga means breath. And it was about many of us don't breathe properly. We don't use our lungs properly. And so yoga therapy is small amounts, small exercises, using the full breath to allow you to relax and allow you to start to heal. And so I started to do that. But it also means that I dress for comfort anyway. I never truss myself up. Nothing I wear hurts my feet or hurts me. Um, yeah, I'm very conscious of that. And I've been, I love heels. Don't get me wrong, but I like them on other people. I have one issue. Look, as you know, I've moved, and
Yeah.
so a lot of that moving was shedding a lot of clothing that I loved, a lot of shoes that I no longer wore, no longer served me. But there's a pair of Jimmy Choos that I bought for my 50th birthday party. I just can't get rid of.
Yeah.
I was gonna put them on eBay, and then I thought, "They're still in the box, they've got the dust, bag. They are beautiful, a thing of beauty, but I wear them. I haven't worn them for years."
But they have that memory attached that's significant.
It's the memory.
Mm.
I know it's the memory. It's the colour is just a beautiful, um I may put them on eBay. Are we the same? We're not the same size, otherwise I'll probably give them to you.
No, you're tiny. I'm like a giant next to you. I doubt that would
Yeah,
fit.
I have Sasquatch feet. This is not happening. So yeah, I look after my body more.
Yeah.
But because the mind and body are connected, I look after my mind first.
Mhm.
And I know that when something's going wrong with me, when I'm getting aches or pains, or when my skin comes out in a rash, which is a big thing for me, I
Mm.
know something's not quite right, and I need to come back to myself and look at, okay, what have you done that you didn't want to do? What did
Mm.
you you say yes to you, where you want to say no to, or how have you not cared for yourself this week? And usually I find the answer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the mind body connection is such a powerful thing that I think a lot of people overlook. And there's a really cool study that said that, when we wear uncomfortable clothing, it actually has a negative impact on our ability to process information because it increases our cognitive load. So being comfortable in what you're wearing actually helps you to think and to, actually get through your day and to get things across. So it's not just about how you look or how you feel, it's also about your mind as well. Like that's actually a
Yeah.
key thing. So I want to like slightly pivot a bit and talk about our background. So we're both Caribbean women. So my
Yeah.
background is Trini and you're Bayesian. And I know in the Caribbean, there's actually a really strong culture of like mending and repairing. So how did your Bayesian kind of background influence your relationship with your clothes and your journey to being like a designer as well?
That's interesting because I'd never looked at it that way, except I always credit my mother for being the person who got me into sewing in the first place. So my mother, both my parents are from Barbados. My mother came over in the summer of 1960, and funnily enough, we were talking about uh, when she arrived, and she had a dress specially made for her for the journey. It's a 3-week journey on the boat to get to England, and she landed, and it was absolutely freezing. And she said, "I can't believe it's summer." She was expecting it to be really hot, and
That's
she,
what my mom said as
all
well. She
right,
saw the sun and she thought, oh, it's
and
going to
she,
be hot.
I know she felt so great in this outfit that I can't remember the name of the woman, but the dress, everybody had a dressmaker nearby in the village, you know, and how it was completely inappropriate for English weather.
Yeah.
So my mother, when she came over, we lived in London until I was 4, and then my father moved the family to Banbury in Oxfordshire because there were jobs going there. My dad couldn't get a job. My mother is and this is important, it's about colorism. My mother is a light-skinned Bayesian woman, and she got a job easily. And my dad was passed away as a dark-skinned man that he wasn't getting the kind of job that he was looking for. So went to work in General Foods factory at the time. Um, and my mother made a home. So she made the curtains and she made all our clothes, and she was always at the sewing machine. So there was fabric around. She had a little, wooden Singer hand operated sewing machine. But when I didn't, like, I played around with her fabric, but I kind of draped it around me and danced around and things like that. I remember she had this chiffon, stretchy, purpley reds and yellows and blues fabric that I remember hand sewing, halving it, hand sewing at the two sides, cutting a hole in the top, and then plomping it over my head. So it's kind of like a kaftan.
Yeah.
But I didn't leave enough room for me to actually walk, so I minced up and down her bedroom. I
Yeah.
must have been about 8, wearing floating around in this kaftan. But it wasn't until I was 15 I developed hay fever, and
Mm,
the common wisdom at the time was to stay away from the evil pollen and stay in the house.
mm,
So, mum bought me a pattern. I think it was Simplicity, which was a pair of wrap sailor's trousers
mhm,
with like a zip fly and a wide wrap belt and flares, and some white cotton drill. And she showed me how to use her sewing machine, and I made my first pair of trousers, which if I saw them now, I would make them again. In fact, I probably will. Beautiful. Things of beauty they were. And I was hooked. I was
mm.
hooked at how quick it was. The other reason I love sewing is because knitting's too long. Knitting
Yeah.
takes long. Whereas sewing, I could make something in an afternoon and I could wear it. So I
Mm,
got into the habit of making things and wearing them out,
yeah.
making things for the school disco, or making something for, and I have had folders of sketchings and drawings that I'd done way before I went off to uni to do performing arts. So her heritage, and what's interesting is that been back to Barbados since.
Mhm.
And my Aunt Ev, who passed at 101, was
Mm.
someone who was also very, I didn't know this, very into fashion, really loved her clothing, sewed, and I didn't realize that that was part of my mother's side of the family. But this is the other thing about fashion design that I struggled with, is that in Barbados it didn't have a status at all,
Yeah.
whereas teaching did. So
Mm.
in a sense, I was never going to sew because that's just what all women did, and everybody knew someone
Yeah.
who made something bespoke, what we call bespoke over here. Bespoke is expensive.
Yeah.
It's, whereas in Barbados, bespoke was just someone made something for you. Similarly, in parts of Africa, as if you're a tailor, that you're someone who sews.
Mm.
Whereas over here, a tailor is someone who, I don't know, went to Savile Row or that kind of thing.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
struggle with that, the two sides of that. I'm completely over that now.
Definitely. I just love how, yeah, it just naturally runs in the family, and it's just something that, it's in your blood. You were destined, it seems, to be in this journey in fashion. And in one of your many, many different careers, you were also a stylist as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you tell us about like how you approached work with your clients? Did you often like make bespoke things for your clients as well?
So there were two stylism. Did I make that up? I think I did. I fell in, like many of things, I fell into being a stylist because I'm not a stylist in the conventional sense. When I think of stylist, I think of like Mel made me do it, or music videos and things like that. But my stylism, I'm going to stick with that word now,
Yeah.
was around encouraging primarily women, often slightly older, as in, 40s, 50s, who to wear the clothes that were already in their wardrobe. I wasn't encouraging anybody to go and buy anything new. Big fan of sustainable fashion, and I'm rethinking my wardrobe now. But certainly it was about where you're happy. It's about finding the joy of dressing again. We forget how much we loved dressing up when we were little.
Yeah.
And I always talk to people about, what did you love to wear when you were little? I coveted a pair of red shoes that I was never going to get because my parents, and I wanted shoes that made a sound on the floor, clacker shoes, I called them. Um, but so we have so much in our wardrobe. We have so many clothes that we bought. We've got clothes, we might have clothes with tags on them. We might have clothes that we haven't worn for years and years and years. As we get older, our bodies change and we become less happy with our body because we want it to be the way it was maybe when we were younger, or maybe we comparing it to people we see in magazines or online.
Mm.
So often we might have kids, we basically choose clothes that somebody's told us to wear. So it might be a specific uniform. It might be clothes that are easy to wash and a lycra and can pull on. It might be clothes that you can wipe things off. Or we wear a lot of black because
Yeah.
we mistakenly think it makes us look slimmer. It does not, please. If there's any message I get, I don't think it does at all. But we choose clothes for quickness and ease. And so
Yeah.
when a rule says, right, this season we're going to be wearing this, then we'll buy that because that's the thing.
Yeah.
Um, but often we have lots of clothes in our wardrobe that we don't wear anymore, but we still love them. So my Wear Your Happy styling was, I would meet people in their homes or when COVID hit, online, and we would go through their wardrobe and they would pull out clothing and I'd give them a different way of wearing things, or putting colours together, for example. You did a lovely, I'm sure you did a blog about colour blocking, which years ago, which was just about choosing different colours, um, bright colours, and also allowing people to fall back in love with colour. We shy away from them. It's almost like there's something about getting older that society encourages women to become invisible. And
Mm.
I think that wearing colour makes us visible and we become less confident in
Yeah.
ourselves. So we dress to blend in. I'm not about that life, clearly, but I don't think anybody should. I think that wearing what you love, and black may be what you love,
Hmm.
but you might accessorize it with something bright or
Yeah.
something vibrant. You see, I
Yeah.
just feel like I would like people to rely less on outside validation and more on working with what you have and the stuff that brings you joy. We are in the midst of a mental well-being crisis. That's not going away. Not everybody can afford therapy, which I believe should be free for everybody, by the way. And not, it's very easy for me to say, get silent, learn to meditate, but these things can sometimes cost money. We haven't got the time. We've got rent and mortgages to pay. You know, Beyonce told us to release our job, but as my friend yesterday on Twitter said, my electricity bill told me to wind my neck in.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. So I think that if wearing clothes you love can help you in some way to lift your mood
Yeah.
and to encourage positive mental well-being, use it.
Yeah.
Absolutely utilize it. I
Precisely.
don't
And
know. No, go
yeah, I was
on.
going to say, I think people think that in order to do that, they need to go out and do a massive haul and just go and buy new clothes, and they're not realizing that everything that in your wardrobe is there because of a decision that you made at a specific time. It says something about you and your choices, and it's not just about being so restrictive. You can think of
Mm.
things in different ways, be creative with it, and give you. But that all of that takes time. It takes time to do
It
that
does.
introspection, and people want things quick. We're in the age of instant gratification. We don't want to take this time. It's easier to just chop things out and click next day delivery and get it now, but not realizing, like you said, you can not just save money but also find yourself again, find the things that you used to like, the person that you used to be that you might have lost for various reasons. There's maybe things might not fit, things might be out of style at the moment, but you can change it and use it in different ways to make it work for the current version of you. And I just think that's so powerful, and it's just great that you're doing that work. Or you did that
It,
work.
it takes it takes confidence as well. I wasn't born confident. I
Mm,
looked confident. 10 years ago, I looked very confident. I dressed, in a sense, I power dressed. I was classic
mm,
80s, 90s babe with
yeah,
the shoulder pads and I dressed to mask how I felt. I dressed to mask a relationship that was spiraling, out of control. And in a sense, I controlled my life. I knew that I'd look good. I
mm,
knew that at least one person would tell me I looked good. And so that's how I used my fashion. But
yeah,
as my mind changed, as I went through my breakdown, came through, if you like, as my mental well-being impacted me, I was able to use fashion to impact the way I showed up in the world. And in doing so, I became more confident. My body is different. I don't have a dancer's body. Some
mm,
would argue I never did. That'll be the boobs.
yeah,
But I I love my body.
mm,
I love it does shit. You know, and I think once I became more confident with me, naked, if you like,
yeah,
then I can put anything
yeah,
on me. And I also feel that what you say about you made a conscious decision to buy that. But
mm,
if you wear it differently, I think the big game changer for me was layering,
yeah,
putting a summer dress over a jumper.
mhm,
Oh my God. That being able to wear summer clothes in the winter is a
mm,
whole level of dressing. So
yeah,
you basically, that thing around bright colours in the summer and dark colours in the winter, I don't adhere to that.
yeah,
If I feel like, wearing that dress I got in Barbados or the head wrap as a top or that kind of thing, I'm absolutely putting it on. If it just so happens that it's going over a polo neck jumper or several long sleeve t-shirts, then so be it.
mhm, I love that. Just having a sense of creativity as well in your wardrobe. I think that's fantastic. And
Mm.
I want to talk a bit more about your recent work. So you've just congratulations actually for your menopause monologues with Boots. I thought that was so fantastic. And also your podcast, Menopause Whilst Black, has been featured in Vogue. You've just been doing so many incredible things, I think, for women in your age bracket. So can you just tell us more about your experience in talking about this area, which I don't feel like gets enough attention, as with most things with women in general? So tell us more about that.
Well, I will say, Shakaila, that I'm glad that I'm having this conversation with you. What are you, a millennial? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm a millennial.
I don't know these things. Because I think that menopause is a topic that we all need to be talking about, and I really, really encourage young women, and I'm going to say particularly young Black women, because that's, I'm drawn to talk about how menopause and growing older and perimenopause will affect us. So menopause monologues, big up Boots, for providing a platform to showcase all our different stories. So basically, there were five women, and we all got on stage a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about our menopause journey and how it affected us. And I think Menopause Whilst Black, my podcast, it came out of tragedy because it was summer 2020, Black Square Summer, when George Floyd was murdered. Um, and we were all kind of a captive audience, and the world seemed to wake up to something that Black folks knew anyway, which is about the injustices and, the racism that exists.
Mhm,
And I knew subliminally, I knew that menopause, well, not subliminally, I knew from my own personal research that menopause can be brought on and exacerbated by stress.
mhm,
I knew this. And I also knew that racism is a form of stress. And I had been talking about menopause amongst my friends for a couple of years. We would meet around my kitchen table. I would feed them. I would give them some tips, and we would feel held and heard and listened to. Um, so I guess the podcast was an extension of that. I looked around and I asked the question: how are Black women who are menopausal like me coping with watching and hearing about people who look like their husbands, their sons, their nephews being murdered on a regular basis? That's some kind of stress. I didn't have the jargon for it. I didn't have the research to back it up. I just knew in my heart something wasn't right. And so I'm researching to find out more about my own symptoms. I was experiencing hot flushes. I had tingly legs. Brain fog meant that I couldn't do my job, which is why I'd left it a few years earlier. But I didn't have any words. I didn't know that perimenopause was a thing, which is the bit before menopause. Anybody who doesn't know, and can last up to 10 years, by the way. And I was Googling and searching, and I didn't see anyone who looked like me. And I don't just mean Black women, which is huge. I also didn't see women who were having fun. They were all, as I said in my monologue, white women with, grey hair, with their heads in their hands, wearing beige and a lot of lavender. You will notice that lavender is everywhere. It's a
yes.
thing. Um, so I started to ask the question. I remember at the time I was much more active on Instagram. It was my weapon of choice, if you like. And so Instagram was one of those places that everybody decided they wanted to diversify their feed. So you wake up like one day later and I had 400 new followers, which
Mm.
which was like, and they all seemed to. It felt like you wake up in the morning and you open your eyes and that your room is full of like 50 white women looking at you, and I'm like, what the, Um, So I disappeared for a teeny bit and then I couldn't keep my mouth shut. And I did this video and it says, Google menopause, click images, what do you see? and people did it, and you couldn't unsee it. It was just this sea of bleh.
Mm.
And so I started to talk about it, and I did some research, and the most recent research at the time was from 2007, where Northamptonshire Medical Trust were asking. They asked 22 BNE, which is British Minority Ethnic, so that's anybody who isn't white, basically, about why they weren't taking HRT as much as white women. That was basically it. And so I decided to do a little research of my own, asking Black British women about their experience of menopause and perimenopause. And the findings were, we don't know anything about it. They didn't know that Black women can start our menopause journey up to 2 years earlier than our white counterparts. And we can also suffer from things like hot flashes more severely. That was common knowledge. And it made me angry that when I found out, because I thought, well, I would have liked to have known that before before I
Yeah.
went. Right. I think there are nuances between different cultures, experience of menopause that are now coming out and people are now researching, but they weren't doing that in 2020. Okay. So, and people wanted to know more. And I suppose people mentioned a podcast. There was one podcast run by my friend Omashadi Bernie Scott, which is called Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause. And that had been going for a year. She's American. And American Black women, African Americans, if you like, African Americans, have a different take on things.
Yeah.
We're similar, but we're different.
Mm.
And more people say, oh, there needs to be a podcast, there needs to be a podcast. And I'm looking around, I'm thinking, oh, someone will do it, or
Yeah.
someone will have done it.
Mhm.
I thought someone will have done the research and they'll tell me about myself and sue me or something, or
Yeah.
someone will have done this so my voice isn't needed. So I
Mm.
bought a microphone and it sat in the box for 4 months. And I eventually, in October, I finally started I did the trailer and it dropped on October the 26th. And I'm now about to start season 4. And it's incredible. First of all, women will stop me in the street or and say, "You're Karen Arthur. I just want to tell you, menopause was Black. I've shared it with everybody." Yada. And that's touching
Mhm.
because it's literally 2 Black women talking. And at the time, that was groundbreaking. And I'm gonna big myself up about that. I'm proud of that. But
You
I
should
wouldn't
be.
say that I was aiming. It wasn't a goal. Like, 3 years ago, I wouldn't have said that that was what I was gonna do. But it's the way I've been able to I just want what do I wanna do? I just wanna share. I just want more and more of us to know and prepare because menopause knocked me for 6, and it doesn't have to do that. And if we start early and we have that knowledge, how powerful women will be.
Yeah.
How incredible our lives will be. And I also really push the menopause isn't a death sentence agenda, if you want to call it an agenda, because it absolutely isn't. I almost swore then. It absolutely is. It, aging is a privilege.
Yeah.
Both of us are grieving.
Yeah.
Grief is fluid, isn't it?
Yeah. Some
We
people
all
don't
know
have that
people who
privilege.
didn't have the privilege of getting to how old you are, certainly to how old I am. I plan to celebrate as often as I can. I celebrate through my clothing. I celebrate through new challenges, um, being open to what comes, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that the podcast is part of that. The more we hear and see people who look like us or have similar experiences to us going through things, the less alone we will feel and the easier life will be to navigate.
Yeah.
Boom!
That was
Done.
perfect soundbite. Perfect. I think what you're doing is so incredible. And I think, yeah, just general, the experiences of not even just Black women, just women in general, is very minimized. We
Yeah.
just have to deal with things. Like I even saw on Twitter, someone posting, oh, you're either you're either a headache girl or a stomachache girl. And it's
Oh,
like,
just
women, I just
yeah,
realizing we wake up every day and we're in pain. Oh,
yeah.
something's wrong with us. And we just kind of get on with it. Or the doctors will be like, here's some birth control, here's some HRT, like just take it and like go away. And it's important that we're taking more ownership over our
Yeah.
well-being and sharing what works for each other, because we're being failed by these institutions that don't necessarily want to understand.
And
Um,
that's patriarchy, by the
yeah.
way, what that is. So when we can't have babies and we no longer adhere to what sexy, in inverted commas, is, then what's the point of us? They don't know what to do with us.
Mm,
You know, guys don't know. So it's time, it's time. My God, it's well overdue. Own that.
mhm.
You know, bun the male gaze. I'm gonna put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah. And just listening to you talk as well, it reminded me of some work I did when I was part of a campaign with a shoe brand last year, and it was talking about forbidden fashion trends. And they basically did this massive survey in the UK, and they found that almost 3/5 of over 55-year-olds, they don't feel pressure in society anymore to dress and act in a certain way. And I just know that's your experience, and I just think it's so interesting. A lot of things you see on social media, it's like, oh, like 30 and 30, and like, oh, before 30, and like everything's always about doing everything when you're young. But what I'm looking forward to is just not giving a shit. And I feel like you perfectly encapsulate that. You just don't care anymore. And it's just such a shame that we're not seeing more women like you in the spotlight. When you see the older women, it's like you said, there's the lavender, it's the beige, it's the, oh, I don't want to be mutton dressed up as lamb. But I don't think that's the majority of the experiences of older women. Would you
I,
agree?
I think I think that I wouldn't say it's that I don't care.
Mm.
Well, I do. That's a difficult one. I tell you why. What I care about is me.
Yeah.
I think what has happened. What happens is we're more aware of what's important,
Yeah.
and my mental well-being is my number one priority, and everything else falls by the wayside. I think that's what happens. I think menopause gave me my voice, definitely. Um, I'm the kind of person who doesn't regret anything. Every single good, bad, horrible thing that happened to me has made me the person who's speaking to you. And these are experiences and they're valuable, you know. I think that as we go older, I've said this before, we have more experience, more knowledge. Why would we be quiet?
Yeah.
You want me to be invisible? Are you crazy?
I know, I've lived.
It's not.
Yeah.
So yes, I hope. I mean, I don't want to. I also want to be mindful of the fact that for many women, many people who experience menopause, it can be an absolutely debilitating time, and there will be people who are listening to this who are not having a good time. But I will say that that will also be about menopause care, and I think that, as I said to you earlier, if we are aware of what's coming and we are able to prepare for that, you know, whether it's, I mean, we don't have to become sudden health nuts, but we know that there are things that are good for us. We know what's good for us, and that's relationships,
Mm.
that's friendships, that's boundaries. Boundaries are huge. Women are taught and socialized to please. We are praised for doing for others. Okay.
Mm.
And that is hard to unlearn.
I
I
know.
had to unlearn that the hard way in my 50s. I beg, please don't wait that long. Please. If you look, if you take nothing away, you know, it's that start young and teach the women around you, the children around you, the kids around you, you know, your nieces, your nephews. It's a whole, it's a conversation that crosses genders. But at the moment, we're making history. You know, we are changing things by doing things differently because it clearly didn't work before. So it's got to work now. And so these women, these, you know, women over 50 or people who are dressing the way they want to dress. It's not just about dressing, it's about everything. It's about creating a life that works for you and serves you, because once you're happy, you give that happiness to other people.
Yeah.
What is it? You can't pour from an empty cup, and any other cliche you want to chuck at it. It's true. RuPaul, if you can't love yourself, I can't even think of it. You'll know it.
I don't even know. You put me on insert platitude joke. But Karen, my next question was to be like, what's your advice? What would you recommend? But I feel like you just dropped too much knowledge just there. I could just imagine everyone at home like writing everything down. Honestly, you are such a massive inspiration and such an icon, and I just want to thank you for joining me today. Honestly, I really appreciate you lending your words of wisdom and all of your life experience. So just to wrap up, for people who haven't followed Karen yet, which is crazy if you haven't, can you tell people where they can follow you, where they can hear more about your podcast as well?
Okay, so the podcast, Menopause Whilst Black, is on all good pod platforms.
Yeah.
And if you do listen, please leave a review so that we can, a 5-star review, so that we ears that need to hear us, because there are people out there who really need to hear these voices.
Yeah.
My weapon of choice, my social media of choice is Instagram. I am the Karen Arthur on Instagram, and I talk about all sorts of things because I've got an opinion on practically everything. But it's usually fashion and mental well-being. Yeah, that kind of thing. And then I have a Menopause Whilst Black, which is everything else basically, but they kind of merge. I've thought about merging them, but I think I'm bolder from an anti-racist point of view on menopause, but I don't know. I'm in transition with all of that, and I'm open to that. That's absolutely fine by me.
Yeah.
That'll do, won't it?
Yeah. Follow both of them. Follow everything, and make sure you
I have a website, thekarenarthur.com. You can Google the Karen Arthur, and my lovely face will come up.
Karen is very heavy on the Google SEO. Yeah, I so enjoyed talking with you. This has been fantastic. This has been another episode of the Big Just Energy podcast with me, Shakaila Forbes-Bell. You can follow me again. Instagram is my main point of choice. So at Shakaila Elise, or if you want to find out more about fashion psychology, it's at Fashion is Psychology on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok at Shakaila Elise and on Twitter, but I'm a bit rubbish at Twitter, I think. Yeah, I post random things about TV and nonsense like that. So follow me on Instagram and make sure you get your copy of Big Just Energy. And yeah, as Karen said, leave a review if you liked it.
Yes.
So thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. It's been brilliant. I loved it.